Greetings and welcome back to the Casual Wargamer. Today's video is one that I've been thinking about for a while due to a discussion with some of my fellow gamers on our local store Discord. Then a couple of days ago, a similar topic came up on Tabletop Titans, which was, should knights be an army in 40k? And with comments from within that video, also whether super heavies should be something in 40k. Knights for me are an awkward one. I can't remember whether it was 6th or 7th. I'm sure in my head it was 7th edition that knights became a thing, but I could be wrong. But 7th is where I think they really started to make an appearance. I even had, for a time when I was playing Death Guard, Forge World put out a series of rules and I think a conversion kit for a Renegade Knight, which was kind of the prequel to the Chaos Knight. And I bought one, not the upgrade kit, I just bought a Knight and I rejiggered it and put some spiky bits on it and made it look all nurgly and had it as a allied unit to my Death Guard. And it always did me quite good. It was even able to put up a fight against the likes of Tau, which otherwise I struggled with. Back then, knights were a very strong option because they had armor values. None of this toughness and wounds malarkey. It was armor values and hull points. And it basically meant that if you didn't have a means of dealing with the likes of vehicles and monsters, you were screwed. If the knight player was able to take out your devastators or whatever your choice of anti-tank units were, you didn't stand a chance because your basic bolter or lasgun or shuriken pistol or whatever was not going to touch them, and they could just basically stride over, smack you, and claim objectives, whatever. But on a really odd sort of way, they did kind of still feel playable. Along comes 8th and 9th edition, and knights suddenly become a problem, I think, anyway. And that is that although they now have a toughness score and a wounds, and therefore can easily be, not easily, but can be taken out by the likes of bolt guns, bolt pistols, las guns, whatever. You don't need dedicated anti-tank weaponry. In theory, they should be quite better balanced to play against the majority of armies out there. But my experience has been that it's kind of the opposite. If you rack up to a table and you haven't brought enough anti-tank heavy weapons, guys with thunder hammers or power fists or whatever, you didn't stand a chance. And once again, if they could take out your options, you were screwed, because you weren't going to chip away enough with basic small arms fire. It was kind of all right if you were playing something like Crusade. I played against knights in Crusade, and I had the option at the time to kind of cherry pick what I took, and I was able to take eradicators and other things like that, and I still got mullered. Much like with Tyranids and Gut Ripper, their relic, which was an auto-include, every Imperial Knight player I faced took the big, I forget the name of it, but it was like a big-ass Gatling cannon, and it would just mow through everything. The little guys would run up and take me out with auto-cannons and what have you. The smaller knights being quite reasonable, they're basically Redemptor Dreadnoughts, but the big knights are a pain in the ass. And it made it really unfun to play against. Chaos Knights even more so. The original game I had against Chaos Knights, I went through, again, it was a Crusade game, but I went through and I was able to chip off a few little guys. When it came to the big one, I inflicted a fair bit of damage to it, and they just went, this chaos effect for them, and it healed. And it was like, well, it was a very feel-bad moment. It was like, why did I even bother playing this game when my opponent could just do that after I poured everything into it? It's not like Necrons with a stand-up ability. It was literally a case of, I'm on this point on whatever the I can't remember what it's called. It wasn't a Warp Storm table, it's something else. But it didn't make for a fun game. And quite frankly, I think my opponent tabled me on that. Come 10th edition, and toughness is going up and wounds going up, I think big knights are a problem. The likes of eradicators and melter weapons not being great against vehicles, only wounding on 5s against the likes of knights, and it might even be 6s depending on what you're facing and other modifiers. But let's just say, from what I kind of see, it's generally 5s. It's not good enough to be able to take the likes of knights down. And I get it. They want vehicles and things to be more survivable, which was always a complaint for me all the way back 30 to 8th. But there's a balance issue. The big knights are too much of a problem. The little ones, as I say, are like Redemptor Dreadnoughts. They're not an issue. You can easily sort of like take them down with the little things and what have you. But the big ones are a balance issue. And I'm not sure how you fix it. Because they've got to have the ability to withstand incoming fire, and they've got to have the ability to put out fire. Knights are an army that kind of need Games Workshop to seriously sit down and think how to play them. And maybe they should go back to something that 40k used to have in its distant past, which was a sort of a points minimum. It used to be that special characters could only be taken in games of a certain point size. And I'm beginning to think that maybe the bigger knights should follow suit. Maybe one at 1,000 points, and then up it a little bit, depending on what. So maybe you can only have 2 at 2,000 points, but no limit on 3,000, by which point everyone can play whatever pretty much the hell they want. But I think something like that to limit the number of big things that come onto the table. Now, one of the arguments on the Tabletop Titans video was that knights should not be an army in their own right. They should be allied forces for Imperial and Chaos factions. And I've got to admit, I like them as an ally thing, but I also think that diversity and variety is very important in 40k. And knights should very much be their own army. They just need that rebalance. Now, speaking of balance, the thing that we were discussing at my local game store is the towering rule. And this is my biggest sort of issue. So they have the towering keyword. It means nothing by itself. But if you go into the ruin section of the terrain section of the rulebook, it says that you can shoot at a towering unit on anywhere on the tabletop. It doesn't gain the benefit of hiding behind ruins. But also, towering units have the ability that says that if they can draw a line of sight to an enemy unit through a ruin or multiple ruins, although it's generally just going to be one, they can still shoot them. And I don't agree with that. I think it's a very stupid rule. It's a very balked rule. Because hiding things behind ruins so you cannot shoot them is a balance thing. It gives a bit more survivability. And in a game that is supposedly, and I use the term supposedly very lightly, less lethal, so don't buy for an instant, Games Workshop, this is not doing it. The little guns and so forth aren't so much of an issue, but knights generally have big-ass guns which are designed more or less to take down large squads of infantry or other knights or other vehicles. When they can just turn around and go, oh, I can see that squad hiding behind there, rev up the chain cannon and go boom, 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 and just take them out regardless of where they are on the table, providing they have line of sight, I think that's broken. I even sort of, just to get a little bit of clarification, I spoke to some friends who are not wargamers, a couple of work colleagues, and I explained the basics. And I said, This is how the game works. You can fire into a ruin, you can fire out of a ruin, you can't fire through. It's a balanced mechanic, but this unit has the ability to do it. An entire army has the ability to do it. And the general response was, that doesn't seem right at all. Now, if intelligent people who don't play the game aren't, aren't kind of focused on their own ruling. I'm looking at this from my point of view, from my army's perspective. Seeing someone who can look in from outside view and they go, that doesn't seem like a very good rule. That seems fairly broken, unfair. I tend to think maybe there's something to it. However, before all the knightly players start jumping on me for, but you can shoot us, I don't think that should be there either. Because right now, towering units and aircraft can be shot anywhere on the table. And I don't agree with that either. I mean, if you've got a sizable ruin, maybe it comes up to half the height of one of these big knights, give them a cover bonus. If they're behind it and you can't see it, you can't shoot them, or you shouldn't be able to shoot them. Likewise with aircraft. When we've got our planes on the table, they're not 2,000 feet in the air, saturation bombing the tabletop. They're skimming rooftops. They're coming in low on that strafing run. When they're in hover mode, like a gunship or whatever, it's darting between the streets, between the ruins, like some sort of attack helicopter. It's not up here where every one of them can see it. That rule needs to go away. It's a fairness mechanic, it's an unfair mechanic, and it needs to be readdressed and rebalanced. I mean, at the end of the day, aircraft, in this example, are no different than you taking a land speeder. So why, a few more points, maybe a couple more weapons, doesn't need to have a completely different mechanic to it. And that's an issue for me with knights, with towering, I should say. The issue with knights is the towering. The game needs to be balanced a lot better. And unfortunately, Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights and things like Wraith Knights need to lose that issue where they can shoot through things. You need to be able to hide from these things. And if that's what you need to do, then that's what you need to do. Rant over. Now, the last thing on this, as I mentioned very briefly early on, was mentioned in one of the comments on Tabletop Titans video, where people said that they felt that super heavies in general don't have a place in 40k. They should be kept for the likes of Apocalypse style games, where you basically bring everything and it's designed to be an absolute kill fest. I disagree. In 4th edition, when the Forge World stuff started to really become, I'll say, popular, it was broken. A lot of the Forge World units were an issue. And one of them was one that came up in these comments, was the Baneblade. The Baneblade is bristling with guns, and it had the rule that said it could multi-fire. You could pick a different target for every gun if you so wished, but you had to do it before rolling for attacks. And people were up in arms. I remember facing a Baneblade and going, what the frag? Then, a little while later, Space Wolf Longfangs, their Devastator equivalent, got the same ability. And then slowly it started to creep down to everybody else. And you realise that actually it's not that bad when everybody can do it. Yes, they have a lot of guns. Yes, they have some big-ass guns. But again, they're constrained by points values. Yes, they have a toughness in the wound score. You could, and especially in this edition, you can slowly whittle things away with small arms fire if you need to, which you couldn't do previously. They're cool models. If you're not playing 40k for the coolness factor, you're doing it wrong. Even as a competitive player, I can rock up to a table. I've done it. I've played against a friend's Astra Militaro army where he brought, I think it was a Shadow Sword, and I think I was playing Genestealer Cult at the time, and I got absolutely butchered. But you know what? To see that thing on the table was awesome. To see there's so many cool units and options, especially some of the bigger units that just don't see the light of day, and it would be awesome to face them on the tabletop. So my vote is that yes, these big ass super heavy vehicles should be a part of the game. If needs be, maybe touch on what I said about earlier with the big knights and say maybe they have a minimum points value. Maybe it's got to be a game with 2k points to take super heavies so that someone doesn't get mushed very early on. But they have a place. Knights, Chaos Knights, super heavies all have a place in the game. Things like Knights, which is really what this video is talking about, just need a rebalance. I think some of it needs to be definitely in their favour, like taking away the you can be shot negative, but it definitely needs to lose that we can see you on the table through that tiny window. You know, I don't want to turn up to a game table where people are only playing either solid block fixed buildings, or they've boarded up every single ground floor window, or even the upper floor windows, depending, because that's just taking away part of the fun of the game. You know, units in cover and so on. That's my thoughts. It's just down to fairness and a fun game. And if you can balance out the likes of towering units and knights, the game will be so much better. I'm really hoping, I mean, I know nobody from Games Workshop is going to watch this, but I'm really hoping that somebody does and they think about getting rid of that silly towering rule to make them more playable and more opponent friendly. What are your thoughts? Pop them down below. I really would like to know, because I'm quite passionate about this. Hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. Whether you agree with me, disagree with it, I don't care. I just want to start a discussion. Until next time, guys, take care. Good gaming.